I'm sitting here I got piles of laundry on my bed. My kids are taking a rest time after much longer. I just wanted to share something. And it really is wanted to share about our security as parents and how sometimes we can fall into these traps of being so insecure with our kids. And maybe it doesn't come out that way. Like maybe we don't think that that's what it is, but I've been really recognizing this as God's been bringing it to my attention, where I feel, or I'm seeing where I'm super easily offended or motivated by myself when it comes to my kids. And I'll just give some examples. I told one of my kids that it was time to get out of the shower. They were having a lot of fun. There was a new bath soap in there and it was a fun time. And I said, no, it's time to get out of the shower right away. It wasn't a time for bartering. It was time to get out of the shower. And, it turned into this whole, I'm so mad at you. I can't believe that you would make me get out of the shower. I'm so mad at you right now. You're being so mean to me. And in that moment, I was tempted to be a little bit offended. And I think that we do that sometimes. We feel like we're offended by these things that our kids say to us. And what happens when we feel offended is we actually get completely into the flesh. And now everything that we might have been able to hear from God to deal with that moment, because that's not an appropriate way for a child to talk to a parent. It's actually not an appropriate way for anybody to talk to anybody. So when we get into that, she's still a puppy. When we get into these situations, who do we think we are to be so offended by our kid that now we have an excuse to not show the love of God to our kids? Because if we take these situations where our kids start saying things to us and they're triggering us and they're making us feel, oh, no, never. How could you think that I would? Or we invalidate it. It's met with this, invalidation of well, that's silly. Or, of course I love you. I got you that soap. How can you think I don't love you? And we actually are not demonstrating the love of God. And we're being personally offended. And so our actions are going to be through the filter of offense. And that's not of God. And in the same way, it really can affect us in the way that we are modeling Christ, even in the way that we set our boundaries for our kids. If we're struggling with that insecurity, it's actually we're gonna try to avoid it in the future. So if I know that there's gonna come, that those words are gonna come back to me when I set a boundary that my kid doesn't like, what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna avoid it because it's scary to me when my identity is threatened by my kids and their words toward me. So I might actually try to avoid those situations. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually creating this thing that's not the way that God set it up. Think about how God is with us. He set it up so that it is this way. This is his will. This is his requirement for us. So we know his will, we find it in his word. He requires that we be like Jesus, that we be love, and that we work to be, holy as the Father in heaven is holy. So he expects us to live these lives that are like him. And he tells us if you do this, I will do this. Even look at in Deuteronomy, the way it's set up, where there was just there was this standard. That's kind of the way that God operates, right? He operates through concrete. His word is his word. His word is always true. His word is the way that it is, and it's always what he says happens, And I think that it's so interesting to me to draw these parallels in the way that we parent, where we have so much security in that. Imagine if the way that we felt was that if we needed something, we knew that we could pray and eventually we could change God's mind on something, or eventually we could that our emotions or our twist on it could get God to see this different perspective. And then, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense now. So he's not that way. And that'd be so stressful for us, because anytime something didn't go our way, that's what we would do. We would try to twist God's arm, but he doesn't operate that way. He operates where he already laid the foundation. We walk in his foundation. And there is this opportunity for like relationship and intimacy with him and trust. My dog is trying to get on my bed with an exercise mat. So we have so much trust in him because we know that we don't have to understand everything. God's ways are higher than our ways. That doesn't, or at least for me, like that doesn't bother me because I know that it's going to be the way he said it's going to be. If I don't understand, it's not something where, you know, if I just complain more, I'm going to get, you know, the thing that I want because I trust him and I trust his love for me and I trust that he's working things out for my good. See? So same thing with kids. When we are too threatened by our kids to hold a firm boundary, we get into trouble with them and we're not doing with them what God does with us. And so we practice this by the things that we say, we live by, even if it's really hard. And so if we want there to be an opportunity for flexibility, which we do need to teach them and model, we phrase it that way. We don't say something's going to be a certain way and then all of a sudden we change our minds. And it's like, oh, you're right, you have a really good point. I mean, sometimes kids have points. And that's great. Like, I think it's awesome when kids can bring things to the table. But if I don't open it intentionally, and this is what we have to be so careful with the way that we talk to our kids. If it's not up for discussion, I don't present it to them as though it could be up for discussion. Okay. So I'm going to give an example. If we're at the library, okay, and we're playing, my kids love to play at the library. And I say something to them like maybe it's time to go, okay? If I need to go in that moment, I'm gonna say something like, all right, it's time to clean up, we need to leave right now. And that's what we're gonna do. And I need to be intentional about the way I present this to them and think about what I need from the statement and the request that I'm gonna make, okay? That would be if we're gonna leave right now. If maybe I think we might have time, but I'd like to leave now, that's kind of my plan, I might say something to them like, I think that it is time for us to get ready to head out. Are you guys ready to leave? Okay, because that opens it up for them. And they might have something to say. They might have, you know, well, we're playing this, is it okay if we play longer? It's awesome to give kids opportunities to like reason and think and, you know, even present counter offers, if you will. But I am now, like, I've been learning, and for a while now, I've been really intentional. If my kids know, if I say something's going to be a certain way, like if I say we're leaving the library now, we're leaving the library now. And if you want to have like, and thankfully we're actually not there anymore with like the ages of my kids, or at least, well, 4 and 6. My one's too little to do this yet, but like we're kind of beyond the, you know, crying the whole way out the door. But I was there at one point, and you have to be consistent so that you actually lay the foundation of no matter what your response is to this, if I say it's this way, it's gonna be this way, and not in like the super like not a power trip, not in a way that's like degrading them or belittling them in any way, but it's modeling calm, confident leadership so that they learn that they can trust what I say and that I have their best interest in mind. And I do even look for opportunities to point that out. You know, if we get home and it's like, look, I wanted to get us home in time so we could play in the sprinkler before we have to go, you know, finish our schoolwork or something like that, where I can point that out. But I just want to encourage you with that, of look at how you're phrasing things to your kids, because God tells you to keep your word. God tells me to keep my word. So it's actually more my responsibility to keep my words to my kids than it is for me to make my kids obey me, because that's actually their choice. Obedience is their choice. I do the best that I can to see that happens, but my job first is to make sure that I'm keeping my word to them. And so I do that by guarding my mouth and the words that I say to them and being prepared to follow through with everything. No empty threats, no bribery, nothing like that. So just like I encourage you to be intentional about how you're talking to your kids. Are you keeping your word? Like, are you actually following through with everything that you're saying to them? Like, think about that. Just evaluate yourself for a day. And I think you'll find that, like, you know, if there's a struggle with, like, you know, your kids following you as a leader, you'll probably find that, you know, you could set some stricter boundaries with yourself and the words that you're saying to them. So, and also not having your identity threatened, not being so insecure when it comes to the words of your kids and knowing who you are in Christ. Like, if you're struggling as a parent with avoiding this, with avoiding these feelings, and all of that, then, you know, go to the word. What does God say about you as a person? Where does your value come from? Where does your worth come from? And, you know, what does God think of you? You know, so go there first, find who you are, and then act on that. Tell yourself that, and don't be threatened when, you know, when a little kid tells you that they're mad at you. You know, like, that can't threaten us. Look at the example of Jesus and the example of Paul. You know, we have bigger fish to fry in this life, and modeling Jesus to our kids needs to be our first priority. So that's my encouragement that I will leave you with, and yeah, I hope it helps somebody.